Wes says, with the cost of tuition reaching record high levels, low-income families find that going to college and university is getting more difficult, and students are drowning in debt, and politicians have a great idea: free education. To those with modest means, Wes will attempt to persuade you that education should be ... It must be controversial. Education should be Wes, education should be.
How many of you have received some kind of post-secondary education in the last 10, 15 years? Some of you. Most of you. There's a doctor in the house, a couple IT people. I want to ask you this. Do you think education should be free to those of modest means? Just raise your hands quickly. Excellent. I am here to tell all of you that you are unequivocally wrong. And here's why. Politicians will argue, and they suggest, that education should be free to those of modest means. They will argue that by offering education, you are then reducing the inequality gap. I think that's false, and here's why. Every year, Statistics Canada comes out with this wonderful ratio, and it's distributed by the Globe and Mail, and the number is 1.6 to 1. And what that ratio is it's the amount of debt, and that's non-mortgage and mortgage debt, compared to how much Canadians earn. And that's the average. And it's $1.6 of debt to every dollar that they make. So my argument is that even the middle class are struggling, and it's not just the lower class. And then where do you set the line? Where do you draw the line saying, well, this person should receive free education, whereas this person shouldn't? The rules are hazy. The government, as always, is very vague in their language, and they're not very specific. So that's my first argument. The second argument is that who's going to pay for this? If you are at the top tax bracket, which I wish I was, you're giving away half of your income. And there's just no more room to fund this free education that the government speaks of. And you know what? There's just something really satisfying when you put that down payment towards that first automobile that you bought when you were a teenager, or you put that first and last down on that rent, that really expensive apartment, or maybe you're lucky enough to buy something here in the city, and you feel that sense of ownership. And I think by the government offering free education to those low income or people in need, they're eroding that, and they're taking away from that. They're taking away that just sense of ownership and that feeling that you get when you walk into your condo or your house and you look around and you say to yourself, I did that. And that holds value. So I've argued against what the government's proposing, the inequality. I don't think it's going to decrease the income equality gap. I've given you reasons why. We can't afford it. And if you tax people too much, they will not want to work, and they will be less likely to work, which means less tax base. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is the third one. And it's the third reason why I don't believe education should be free in Canada, or the US for that matter. And that is, when you bend this rule or this law, and you bend it, you can break it. Now, it's not as absolute as, say, physics or mathematics, but it's equally devastating. And that is when you mess around with the law of supply and demand. And we have an economist in the room, and she knows all about the law of supply and demand. And when you mess with it, you don't have to go very far to see its implications. Now, let's go to Cuba and let's go to Trinidad and Tobago. I know they're not Canada, but they're two countries that offer free education. Now, the Cubans are some of the most educated, smartest people on the planet, and the Trinidad and Tobagans are up there as well. There's a lot of doctors in Cuba. The problem is they can't find work because there's too many of them, and the government has interrupted that law of supply and demand. And the same goes for Trinidad and Tobago, where you have all these people, and they've got some, and Trinidad and Tobago has this wonderful British influence, so they have the wonderful school systems that's free from K all the way to university. And they have all these people who are becoming lawyers, becoming doctors, but they can't find work. So under a regime of free education, be prepared to travel. Cuba sends their doctors to Venezuela, to Colombia. They'll send them everywhere because they can't work in their own country because there's just too many of them. So in conclusion, a society which provides free education to those of modest means is not a society in which I want to create, and it is not one that I wish to leave for my children.
Wes, you talked about giving, when you give out something free, you value it less, such as you don't value the car or the house, anything. But I would argue the opposite. I say, what about those families that don't have the feeling of hopelessness, struggling with low income and seeing no hope getting out of it, because only through education you get better jobs. But if you don't have this education and you have the means to pay for it, then you will always be stuck in that poverty trap. But that's besides the point. But so let's have a minute of feedback to give to Wes. But then again, Wes might be onto something. I don't know. If you give something free, we tend to, it's like buffet. We tend to overindulge and then we just all spend all our lives in school and not contribute to society. I don't know what to decide. So let's have a debate on it. Let's welcome Dave, our debate master.
Debate. My topic was actually Wes's question. He stole my topic. It was whether university education should be free. So now, since he already presented the fact